Um, Hello, everybody. To all those of you in Zoom land and in-person land, welcome to our second evening of reading events. Tonight, Kia Rogers will be introducing each of our guests, and we have a very full evening, and we have a very full sunshine shining on us right now. So please enjoy both. Yeah, and without further ado, Kia.
All right, thank you. All right, so to start, we have Alejandro de Acosta. So Alejandro de Acosta is a teacher, writer, and translator in no particular order. He has translated philosophy and poetry from Spanish and French. He has also published 2 books of critical and experimental essays. His new book poema publishing project freely distributes poetry and prose, most recently focusing on works in translation, with 5 new titles published last year. This year, he has published poem summaries composed with Joshua Beckman and contributed a translation of Osvaldo Labradini to the volume Ultimas Poblaciones, published by Ediciones Chinatown, Argentina. He has completed the 4th of 6 novels in translation by Ariel Lupino and is currently working on a collaborative translation of Capriojito by Agustina Perez, as well as a book presenting multiple writing experiments in a new form. Alejandro currently lives in Gainesville, Florida.
Hello, did I just get introduced? Can you hear me?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, it's all good. I'm ready. Let me just see if the light's ready. There we go. Okay. Sorry if I was a little late joining everybody. I feel like I could be even more green. It's meant to be. Am I pretty green? I want it to be. I want it to be green.
You're green. It's green for sure.
Great. Yeah. Okay. So tonight I'm going to read. Sarah was talking in the first night's reading about reading something all new, and I'm going to do the same thing. I have something very fresh for you all, which I've just been working on in the last couple of weeks. And it is the beginning of the novel Caperucita by Agustina Perez. So give it a listen. I think you'll find a lot to enjoy about it. Let me just do one last sound test. Am I good? Can you hear me okay? Volume, etc. Doing good? Okay, here we go. Caperucita crosses the bound that separates the parched land from the final settlements. Philip II, the daring, had placed there a baobab brought expressly from Crimea, from the Tartar region of Crimea. He placed it where the trench begins, the trench that separates the parched land from the final settlements, back when the bridge wasn't in the plans. Bridge. You have to be French, you have to be from Pringles to call that rope a bridge. That rope was woven by a hard-working chore lady. She was the one tasked with unwinding Jesus the Christ's crown of woven thorns. Philip II found the rope by mere chance in a bottle while moving to the monastery palace of San Lorenzo de El Escorial. He found it after having drunk it all. Back then, he drank in the dark, sitting on the floor, back against a cold wall of egg yolk stained colored glass. What he felt was a needle prick in the inside of the right commissure of the lower lip. Back then, he had already abandoned goblets, as they seemed greatly foolish. He drank a thick black wine. Black and thick ended up in a needle prick hysteria. So he said, let's see. He gave in and used light, which he hated. The bottle was green, and even empty looked black. But something surprised him, indiscreet sparks of a golden color, the same ones you can find in Goldwasser today. Philip II, the indiscreet, started to pull on the skein. It was incredible, but it was. When it was day and the nocturnal veil was drawn from the yolk orange, he found the whole room flooded by a skein of the same green as the bottle shattered in sparkling thorns. Time had flown by. The thorns had turned his hands into a sieve. The orange light passed through them and drew cones on the wooden floor. The blood was tame and red. Philip II, the unerring, knew right away what he had to do. He knew the risk that hands like that run. He knew the risk he had run in his sole excursion, unpremeditated or not. To the final settlements that won him for all time, but secretly the nickname, the Daring. So then, without hesitation, he hired the chore lady. The chore lady's was not an easy task. She had to make out of the skein, that splendid crown of thorns, a bridge. For that, she needed to iron out the curves of the material, the concave and the convex and the others. But she had, at the same time, to mind that the thorns remain intact. So therefore, even before the get-go, the use of the boiled limestone was thrown out, what was used back then for that ripe corn. Given the proximity between one thorn and another, she had no recourse but to iron out the curves bareback with her hands, scrubbing as if they were the palatial stairways. The chore lady completed her work in due form and timely manner. From then on, her hands never again saw the light of day. Fortunately, one could say. We know the horror of the pilot light of the sun, but the expression is a pigeon turn, and here it's about something else, of a chore lady on whose touch, perhaps, the waterway of the world depends. Her hands were covered by fingerless gloves, latex, black. It was the same material used to decorate the heads of those given over to the fate of the gallows. She sewed the gloves herself. She tied them with a rope. The rope she got from the bag, granted her personally by Philip II. It was a white musk-colored bag that held 30 denarius. She tied the knot herself with her free hand and her teeth. She made it loose enough to allow some of the blood to stay on course, but also tight enough to prevent consciousness to wander about freely. From then on, she'd live in the Constantine stupor of a lay baobab. Philip II didn't delegate important matters. Philip II sent himself alone to Crimea in one of his expeditions, repeated thrice yearly to celebrate the grim reptile advent of his death. Philip II returned in a pilgrimage, alone in all loneliness on his way back to France. Philip II. Philip II, the pilgrim, carried in on his narrow back the enormous baobab to the edge of the parched land, mindful of the danger involved in a random parishioner entering the final settlements. And then sometime later, with his holy hands, he set up, kit and caboodle, the Frenchman bridge, the rope made by the chore lady with the crown of thorns of Jesus the Christ. But before, with his holy ones, he scratched the earth, right where the bridge was to begin, marking it, to make it unfading. He boxed it in with a hash. Philip II raked the earth like a dog, like a saluki, the kind that don't dig up the tombs of the dead, which everyone is, dead. That's where he plunges, like a stake, the baobab. The baobab is red. It so happens that the baobab doesn't excommunicate itself from a memory that sunflowers it. Once upon a time, it was March 16th. It was when a Stuka, a ground attack aircraft designed by Hermann Pohlmann, bloomed in the blue sky. The sky was blue. Blue. The Stuka was white. The explosion was burgundy. Like Philip II, it was red. The fire was. The baobab, it's red, but now. In that Stuka, there was a pilot who turned to shreds, red, instantaneously. The pilot was Joseph Beuys, and he fell not of his own weight, but slightly pushed down by the sun's pilot. Dawn had just begun. Joseph Beuys, as a mass composed of ice crystals with zero density, held his place in the contest. He wouldn't allow his arm to be twisted, wouldn't allow. Thus, all the extensive kilometers that made distance between the body and the earth. He floated, one might say. In the last 9 steps, the 9 footfalls, his density conglomerated and his acceleration grew dimensional. We don't know what started first. Did he gain weight? And was that what precipitated the speed? Or did speed convoke the parishioners of matter? What is certain is that even so, he didn't touch Earth. He fell, yes, but brilliant and exact, he landed on the neck of a hare, which broke at once, like the stem of a flower, as a goodbye. The hare had been whispering with utmost seriousness into some grass. There nearby, the baobab. In the tallest and most remote heights of its branches, there hid Myrtodermi, who painted everything the hare was saying. The hare, before the accident, was explaining to some Bermuda grass the complex weave, almost like a crown of thorns, of atomic alterations generated in matter by fire when the adequate atmospheric conditions are given. But the hare was not able to finish its tale due to the mishap. The hare lay bloodless, and at its side, bloodless, there lay Joseph Beuys, and Myrtodermi. Plunged in the deepest desperation, she remained. She hatched, therefore, a plan. Accurate enough. Myrtodermi, who wanted to know the end of the hare's tail, and who wanted to avoid the end, Joseph Beuys's death, tore the flesh off the hare with her hands, as if seeking the end. Like a dog, saluki, sacred. Seeking, let's say, redemption for 2 unjust deaths, which in fact is what they were, the dead, all of them. Before or after, who really knows, Myrtodermi, her very self, scratched the baobab trunk with her nails, leaving it on the edge of drunken nausea. From that edge, like someone losing blood and not, emanated a thick resin. Thanks to precisely those 2 actions, the courteous dismantling of the hare and the baobab, Joseph Beuys saved a life already irredeemably lost by decree of the pilot of the sun. No other event of analogous dimension appears in the records. It was Myrtodermi who wrapped Joseph Beuys in a diamantine cape of baobab resin and then covered him with the hare's fur. The annals of history, always mistaken, say that this task was carried out by local natives, but no, it was a foreigner. It was an Argentina, stateless with the best of them, wholly Argentine. Myrtodermi saved him, Joseph Beuys, thus redeeming in one fell swoop the sudden death of the hare, who fell entirely when he who fell on her nacre neck was Joseph Beuys, his very self. Our heroine is Myrtodermi. It was the nails of Myrtodermi that, cleaning the hare, clearing the baobab, stole the superior prey from the Pilates. To Joseph Boys, they gave the gift of life, and to the hair and its great hopelessness, the portable grave that its highness deserved, and the new form of eternity. When Philip II arrived at the scene of the crime, he found Joseph Boys laid out on the sun-soaked earth. He had his eyes fixed on the sun, a blood-splattered blade of grass laid out diagonally on his eyelids, like a halfway assembled cross. On the eyelashes, tiny drops of red and dirt. But these drops, a product of the reflection of the sunbeams bouncing off the baobab resin, spreading like a blanket on the soil, sparkled like gold Wasser or a crown of thorns. The resin of recalcitrant gold, outcome of the cuts on the surface of the baobab's trunk, superior, accomplished of espionage washed over the soil. Joseph Boys barely breathed, but he breathed. When Philip II arrived at the scene, the baobab was still trembling somewhere between green and yellow. It was just after that when the exile, which began to sunflower in a red that would not soon leave it, as if a medal honoring the having been of the strife. Philip II, the knot in the loop, could not have known that because the entire series of events led to the baobab's steady steps on his back. His back was lean. Only when he stabbed it into the ground, like a gaucho facon, did he notice its quite strange color tone. Quite strange, he thought. The one that may be observed from the side at a certain time of day on the fleshy cheeks of a small mound of child that seemed made dense by the hands of a sculptor who bordered or embroidered the middle edges. Small mounds that flashed like lightning that night, like bad lights in the final settlements. The kid with the matches. Strangely, though no one could have known this, the trench that separated the parched land from the final settlements was 300 cubits long. 50 cubits was it wide, and of 30 cubits was its height entire. Given its proportions, identical to those dictated to Noah by an indolent God, it would not have been strange if it was the spot where the ark definitively beached. The present trench was thus the result of the first stagnation, followed by the scrapping of the ark or its hurried mass looting. There's no way to know for sure. What is known is that the limit of the universal flood marked the distance, severe though remarkable, between the parched land and the final settlements. What's for sure is that the ark's not there, and the trench is definitive, perfect, the dead. With time, the absence of the ark became what it is today, a flood at scale, a meeting of marsh and miasma. One can return from the final settlements to the parched land from any cardinal direction, any one. That's why it's strange that one can only reach the final settlements by means of the bridge made of the reused crown of thorns of Jesus the Christ, bridged by the great baobab. One may understand why Philip II, the second known living being in all universal history, who was able to make his way to the final settlements and return by proper motus, the first with a clear lack of conscience, allowing him to cancel access to those hearts forever, walked on foot all the way to Crimea and returned on foot with a preposterous baobab on his narrow back, which for all eternity ruined his posture and dismantled his fingertips and fingerprints, not to mention leaving him immobile due to a disturbance that his doctors assure is of a somatic nature. One may grasp that he has placed that tree, which is itself excess, at the gates of the trench so that none dare enter the final settlements. What is not comprehensible is why, having concocted in his imagination, and here on earth that safe passage, deceptive as they all are, in the very act, and almost at the same time, he bothered to ruin the hands of a chore lady, having her smooth out a crown of thorns to make a bridge, placing thus in crisis the closure stratagem he himself had developed. Come on with that bridge stuff. French things, French from Pringles, Natch. Philip II, we mustn't forget, after all, was French. Having crucified the baobab at the gates of the entryway to the trench, Philip II's hands were covered with a thick burgundy resin. Sometime later, he took it upon himself to place with those hands the bridge. Those who saw him with his hands in such a state, courtesans and friars few, and know of the story of a woman recently become a woman, cannot cease to think that Philip II, with those red boxing gloves and inexorably blue flesh, does greatly seem to resemble an idol of Nova Friburgo, of whom it is told that as soon as he returned from delaying, wasting the fingerprints, fingertips of hands with a deck of cards in a little shop, reeking of alcohol fumes and interwoven with the snores of an almost sleeping yokel, he would strike with inexplicably blind fury the sole person not hired to venerate him. The only one who could, so the rumor went, look at him with eyes other than those of a beheaded lamb. So it goes. So they say. They say. Caperucita had been assigned a task. Her father had ordered her to take groceries to her grandmother Beatrix. Beatrix lives in a little hut next to the final settlements in the very bound of the end. To arrive there, one must travel a tremendous bend on the verge of a highway of parched earth, where a tricksy dust takes a persistent hold on the iris. This makes Caperucita rebel. To have to take on the eviction of that micro dust that was never invited in. Also, the lack of parental responsibility of the father, who has at his disposition a wagon drawn by 9 billy goats and all the time in the world. The journey by carriage takes less than 7 minutes. On foot, due to the tergiversations of the terrain, due to the short legs of the legate, it takes 7 days. Caperucita, jaded, takes the package in hand. The package is a nylon bag in which 3 brimstones, a blister pack of paracetamol, and an endless amount of fine needles all tinkle together. Beatrix must take the father's golem using precautions as she follows the steps. The first is to make the sign of the cross at frenzied speed on her forehead while praying the refrain that allows one to keep the evil eye at bay. The second step, once the cooing has put the golem to sleep, consists in turning him over and rubbing one by one the 3 brimstones up and down his gigantic back until they spark. Then, following the procedure, which ends as soon as the last splinter of brimstone's gone in, shrinking back, and Beatrix's torrent of blood, her blood becoming not unlike a baobab, Goldwasser, and just as intoxicated. Once sunk into that mist, that collapse of consciousness, Beatrix must approach as best she can the 3rd step, grind up the paracetamol in her hands, daub the powder in musk and gall, and smear the golem's extremities with the ointment. 4th, except in the extremities, every pore of the golem must be covered by one of the thin needles. As in a telegraph that sends a convoluted message, the collocation of the needles follows a particular and precise arrangement. Indeclinable. Memorization is easy for Beatrix because it follows the same sing-song that she prays when the 5th step arrives. 5th, having buried with her teeth, one by one, the slivers in the flesh, it's time to cure the golem's indigestion. Beatrix does it in a strange way known only to her. Instead of using a tie to measure the distance and go from there, she wraps the golem in thin cloth as if it were a mummy, as she says her prayers with her eyes turned aside. Beatrix's technique is infallible. Everyone knows it. Beatrix, Caperucita, the father. Okay, I know that is a cliffhanger ending, but that is where I'm ending for tonight. That is literally the first dozen or so pages of the novel. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you liked it.
Yeah.
Up next, we have Joanna Kaufman. So, Joanna Kaufman is an artist and writer who works with mediums of language, paint, and music. She has worked as a teacher of second language acquisition and art in the United States and abroad, and has collaborated on text image projects, including illustration of 13 storybooks with independent writers. She received an MFA in creative writing from PNCA of Willamette, where she is currently the Low Residency Creative Writing Alumni Fellow. Her work is held and within public collections, including the City of Portland, Oregon, Regional Arts and Culture Council, and the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. A descendant of European immigrants and a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, she lives in Trout Lake, Washington, at the base of an active stratovolcano and near the site of a village called Cranes Place, in former days for sandhill cranes, which nested in wetlands historically part of the Yakima and Cowlitz Moorlands.
Thanks, Alejandro. That was amazing. Good to be here. Part of my writing practice is to write from walks. When I travel to a town in the city, I often walk and then just go into the streets, from the buildings, from within myself. I live in a rural setting, a small town with a population of 700 people. And so I enjoy walking in the city because the stories that emerge there on the streets are very different from the commons from which I mostly do along the same set of county roads or in some roads. Like Alejandro said, harkening back to Sarah Jackson's talk at the opening night, I initially had prepared to read to you from 3 pieces that were newer pieces that related to travel and transport, to this walking, text of the woods, text of the city, of futures and dreams, diluted, subverted, fractured, rearranged, and spoken through different tactile vantage points. But I realized that for tonight, I really wanted to read a recently revised piece that seems to be the origins for some of that walking and some of the intuitions, creative intuitions, and intuitions of listening to a space or place that first emerged for me in that practice. So I'm going to read a piece, an essay titled "To That River Which Has an Essay in this piece." During the summer of 2015, having completed the year teaching in a rural school in Southwest Washington, I flew to Barcelona to bike in the Pyrenees Mountains with my friend Tina Nicole, and later to walk a portion of the Camino with my husband Michael along Spain's north coast. The travel was a kind of pilgrimage to mark the passage from 10 years teaching in public education into the work I would be doing in painting and illustration. I hoped to reflect on this life transition while walking in the country of our effects on the state of the whole. There had been some years before this trip a dream in which a man with black, shining hair stood at a podium in a performance hall filled with everyone I have ever known and have ever been related to. From an obscure door at the back wall of the hall where this man was speaking, I entered and sat behind my great-grandmothers and grandfathers, behind my parents and alongside my 2 sisters. A few moments later, everyone in the hall began to sing what was collectively known to all those present as the philosopher's incantation. It was a solemn song written by the philosopher Heraclitus, who was known as the dark philosopher because his writings were obscure, difficult to decipher. And it was a song that I had never heard before, despite everyone there knowing it by heart. I listened as the hall filled with the voices in song of the inconsolable collective longing, too great for anyone to sing alone. Then the man at the podium delivered a speech about the lines which persist always out of reach in each of the 4 present directions. When he had finished speaking, I walked up to the podium. He reached for his guitar, which had been resting at his feet, and he brought it close to his right side. Graciously stepping down to greet me, he extended his arm toward the door. We walked through it. In the glow of the Iberian sun on the other side of the door, I could see that he was the Spanish poet and playwright Federico Garcia Lorca, who one month after the Spanish Civil War began on orders of Franco-era military officials, was arrested and killed. It was August 18th or 19th, 1936. Lorca's remains rest in an unknown grave between Biznar and Alfaco in the province of Granada. In many ways, it was the dream of Lorca which opened the door to Spain, and to this time the transition that led me to travel in the land of his poetry and flamenco, with duende and play bullets and sounding remain following. My friend Tina and I arrived to Barcelona on different airlines. We met at a small hostel near the heart of the city. It was hot. The late night air pulsing with humidity after a thunderstorm earlier in the day. Before heading into the mountains, we spent time in the neighborhoods of Barcelona. We walked the city in loops, curves, along ancient and modern streets, led by our curiosity, our hunger, our maps, our eyes, our need for rest. We were guided by the Mediterranean Sea to the east. We visited the architecture of Antoni Gaudí at La Sagrada Familia, a city block held within scaffolding, an impossible seeming mountain, intricate Gothic arches, stained glass windows, curved tree forms and cave alcoves, snail and bat gargoyles, woven spires that rose to become bunches of grapes, quince, orange, architectural inspirations of the fruits of the spirit. We climbed city streets of Carmel Hill to Gaudí's Parque Way, where we could see from the park's upper terrace of undulating walls and benches beset with brilliant mosaic and white wood, Barcelona's rooftops. Walking across shards of tiger-painted teacups, pitted seagulls and fractured earthenware, round through dark columns into shadow cave-like passageways, echoes softened, classical forms morphed into tablet construction with columns leaning and twisted as roots to span the red dirt ground. Vaulted stone ceiling. We stood within an archaeological inheritance, dig of architectural ghosts past and present, buried and resurrected, our minds steeped in Catalan mechanism. We found relief from the persistent sun along the tree-lined pedestrian streets of La Rambla. La Rambla had originally been a natural arroyo which caught the spring and autumn rain from the Polsarrola hills and drained the city's sewage along the south end of Barcelona to the sea. With the expansion of Barcelona's city walls to include La Rambla and its bordering neighborhood of El Raval, the drainage was diverted, and in 1440, La Rambla became the road it is today. La Rambla is the only street on earth that I wish would never end, rich in sounds, abundant of breezes, beautiful of meetings, ancient of blood, Rambla, wrote Lorca. We shared Lorca's sentiment as we walked in the shade of plum trees and passed cooling fountains. In the Gothic quarter, we stopped at a cafe and ate salted Spanish omelets and blistered peppers. The sun had turned beyond its high point, and a breeze emerged from the sea. The afternoon became a body of light, reflecting passages of cloud, describing medieval depths and sea salt streets on our skin, washing over us with smells of fresh lemon, sea bass, cigars, and gasoline. Feeling full and without search, we continued walking, anticipating evening's pink sun. We peered into shops lined with rows of colorful shoes. We passed racks of green chiffon scarves, chilled buckets of gladiolus and rose, wrought iron balconies, small dogs waiting outside. Our eyes were the red and yellow flags of Catalonia, old pine cathedral pews, beams of stained glass, sun, pigeons and swallows nesting in skyline of every horizon. As we turned onto Paisage del Bon, which was the street, the palm trees filled with wind, flapping with ragged penguins. I interrupted my friend. A lot of people died here. I mean, I left. The words came suddenly, unexpectedly. Haven. It was as if my intuition spoke out loud to tell me something about myself, about the streets that they needed to know, needed to hear, spoken aloud and clearly. It wasn't like me to speak with such certainty about the felt presence of the ancestral land, and I didn't know the history of the streets very well. As I said, I had never been to Barcelona. A woman passed over cobblestone, her measuring heels clicked in time. She carted a basket of golden roses. She clutched an umbrella and a worn newspaper beneath her arm. Her red lipstick set against the blue sky. Two children, full of family newness, emerged from a narrow street, chasing a small river ball, time suspended in the reach of their hands toward the movement that escaped me. When I was younger, a friend who I looked up to and embodied a keen scientific mind told me that I should not speak so much about things that I don't know, that I should work to qualify what I don't know with statements such as, I don't really know for sure, but I sense that, or I haven't had a chance to verify this, but I think that. The suggestion came after I expressed one too many thoughts or perceptions, perhaps, or feelings that were objectively unverifiable. My way of expressing must have bothered him, but he felt the need to tell me this, to save me from being dismissed, at best, or being ridiculed, at worst. I really took it to heart, because I wanted to be listened to. I didn't want to be someone who speaks from a familiar source. I didn't want to be dismissed. I gradually began to use more qualifying phrases, and opted to speak less about things that I really couldn't prove. How does one prove intuition or hope? And so I felt embarrassed about what I had blurted out to my friends too. It was so certain and so unverified. Had I been disrespectful to the ancestors to make such a claim without having any basis for knowing? Had I been disrespectful to my friends in casting a potentially false presence on our part? I had no research, no proof, no idea. They just spoke out of me, the streets and woods. I said nothing more but linked arms with my friend, to physically connect, to be as kindreds, to feel our mutual experience seemed important. Though she had not sensed the presence of the dead, she obliged in being close. We walked slowly, we spoke softly, we listened more. Beneath the wind's gripping disclosure, the streets and their histories were altogether new and unfamiliar to us. We arrived at the steps of the 14th century Basilica of Santa Maria, built in the Catalan style between 1329 and 1383. The basilica's imposing stone walls towered over nearby apartments and shops. An exterior wall revealed deep fitting at shoulder height, while the surrounding stones were smooth and worn, hidden from more gradual erosion. But something happened at this place, at this wall. From the basilica, we turned and saw a plaza and a memorial arch. Amid the pressing feeling of being among the dead, I felt a strange relief that we might encounter a reason for the darkness haunting the cemetery. We crossed the street to visit the memorial. The site, named Posada de los Moreros, or Grave of the Moreros, is a memorial which commemorates those who died defending the city during the siege of Barcelona in September 1714. Nearly 23,000 soldiers died during the siege. The fall of Barcelona marked an end to the War of Spanish Succession and subsequently an end to Catalonian autonomy. In 1821, amid pressure from King Carlos III, organized parochial cemeteries, the mass graves of the defenders were paved over. Then, in 1989, the burial site was revealed when architect Carmen Pio demolished the buildings in the square, covered the ground with red brick to symbolize the blood of the dead, which would forever soak the ground. Today, the memorial is visited during the National Day of Catalonia on September 11th. It stands as an emblem for Catalan independence. We walked the periphery of the memorial and tried to interpret the excerpt of Frederick Soler's heroic poem, Al Posada de los Moreros. Etched on a low red granite wall, it reads, Al Posada de los Moreros, and it's in Catalan, But I translated a random roundabout translation from Spanish into English. Not one traitor is buried in the grave of the nobles, even when our flags are lost. It will be Soler, a 19th century Spanish playwright, poet, and theater impresario, wrote the poem which told a man and his grandson to spend 3 unnatural days digging graves for tens of thousands of soldiers who died during the siege in Ponteri. As they dug and buried, they separated the bodies of loyal Catalonian soldiers from those of the traitors who were wearing the uniform of France. A portion of the poem tells of the endlessness they faced as they died. Haba, this is the translation. Haba, the poor old earth, with the help of his grandson. For 3 days now he has been burying. War brings so many deaths, that the pits he has moved are through. From dawn to dusk, from night to morning, the dead go like a lamb, and he opens passage with the hoe to that river which has no end. The poem ends with resolute devastation. As the grandfather and his grandson tragically find the body of the old son. He is also the boy's father, dressed in the uniform of the traitor. They cannot bury him. That's the no. It's the effort.
No residency, right?
I'm just. We cannot bury him alongside the cathedrals because not one traitor is buried in the grave of the nobles. Even when our flags are lost, we will be honor. Nearly 12 years after the siege, during the Spanish Civil War, the story repeated. Brother fought brother, neighbor against neighbor, father and son turned their weapons against one another. The red oxide steel beam emerged from the entombed red ground of the nobles. It arched toward the basilica. It held a torch at its top. Above them was green. We stood beneath the arch, beneath the torch, raised to wind. Its brush and feather swayed among the leaves. It entered a ritual of green. 4 years after walking in Basilica, my experience continued to grow from a walk in which a communal intuition emerged into an attempt to remember those who had died. I returned to Barcelona with research from home to retrace our passage through the city and found the Balfour Quarter in La Ribera, the Basilica of Santa Maria del Mar, the Passage to Rome, the street where the intuition lives, and the facade de los Marinos, the grave of the nobles. We learned that the area within the Bourne had been inhabited for thousands of years. The remains of the Temple of Augustus from Roman occupation. Dating before the 1st century BC, the word Bourne, Catalan for jousting field, was a medieval site which held jousting matches and tournaments. I learned that the Plaza de Santa Maria near the entrance to Basilica was a Roman cemetery, later a medieval burial site, and then in the 16th century it was a site where victims of the Inquisition were executed. And in 1936, the Basilica burned for 11 days after it was set fire by anti-clerical rioters at the beginning of the Spanish Civil War. I realized that I had carried 2 memories from the encounter in Passage de Rome in Barcelona. The first, intuition of the world, had affirmed the memorial site, and the second was an association with the site as a mass grave of the Spanish Civil War, had brought the site into question for me When I later learned that the book Mulberries actually marked the place of burial in the siege of Barcelona. This caused me to question the association of my experience. However, in retracing the memory, I found that what was sensed, had come from the ancient city. The city buried, paved, reconstructed many times over. A sense from time and beyond the world still around, the eternal coming and the grave of the mountains. When the arroyo flooded along La Rambla, its surging waters took everything out to sea, leaving behind soaked earth and displaced soil from the coastal areas. Today, the waters don't run with the same force. Just as Lorca spoke of not wanting La Rambla to ever end, he too must have felt the inborn surge of life from the old river's passage, from energies present in the land still wanting to hold in the waters. Along the verdant, tree-lined street, a ghost current performed in the hypnotic passage of pedestrian shuffled feet, in search of shade and water to quench the unlimited heat of summer. And along the Passage of Home, there is a displaced river of life within the blood-soaked ground of the grave of the Mulberries. So there's dissected poetry speaks in the fits and starts of the eternal flame, wind-tasseled trees, stacked, smoked, blackened walls, narrow streets in shadow. Imagine 23,000 unmarked graves. Earth hidden to the sea. Who can rest as they walk unknown footsteps over their bones? Steps that haunt the pit of lives, swept as wheat, as salt and tears beneath the mulberry, beneath the city. They gather in eddies around the wrought iron gates, hinged beneath cornerstones and long walls, knocking at every entrance and exit, waiting for the streets to divulge their secrets, hidden and covered by stone. It is another river, haunted with longing and without end, in its attempt to reach the sea. Thank you.
And last, we have Jake Ponteri. So, Jake Ponteri, directed the creative writing program at Marylhurst University from 2008 to 2018, and is now the program head of PNCA's low residency creative writing program. This book of creative nonfiction, Someone Told Me, has just been published by Open House. He's also the author of Dark Mountain Inside Me and Wetlocked, which received an Oregon Book Award for creative nonfiction. Two of Ponteri's essays, Listen to This and On Navel Gazing, have earned notable mentions in Best American Essay Anthologies. His work has also appeared in many literary journals: Gaze, His Proposal, iRide, Seattle Review, Forklift, Ohio, Nature, Cimarron Review, Tin House, Clackamas Literary Review. While teaching at Marylhurst, Ponteri was twice awarded the Excellence in Teaching and Service Award. In 2007, Ponteri founded Show Tell, the workshop for teen artists and writers, now part of summer programming at Portland's Independent Publishing Resource Center, on whose resource council he serves. He teaches memoir classes at Literary Arts. He lives with his son Oscar and Oscar's dog Mel.
Yeah, thank you. Good work, Kia. Thank you. Actually, I want to thank Kia Rogers and Justin Duyal for their awesome work this residency. Just keeping it together. Thank you, y'all. And congratulations, Joanna, on your fellowship. Just awesome work. Okay. Invocation. What is going on within and around and beyond my body that makes it so I crave love in a way my 20-year-old self, oh, I can hear him with great clarity, is mocking vociferously. I crave small acts of kindness, loving words, affirming words, acts of love, of devotion. Let me hold this door open for you and let me send Jenny of Vermont a text message to tell her how much I enjoy our friendship. Let me procure a plant and make a card for Jesse and Bob, who just bought their first house. Let me send a note to Lolita to let her know I'm wishing her well. Let me make my son his favorite meal. Let me thank the person whose largely invisible work has supported mine. Let me make my son his favorite meal again. Let me extend sincere gratitude to the woman with blue hair who bags my groceries and tells me how her shift is going. Let me telegraph love to all of those I've disappointed or hurt. Let me telegraph love to people I will never meet. Let me share the burden of the pain you feel in your body. Let me make rice and beans for the couple living in their van parked on the street outside my apartment building. Let me open my heart to joy, to delight, to wonder and silliness. Let me listen again to your stories, which is also to say, let me help us locate ourselves in this moment. Come all ye ghosts. Let me hear anything you have to say, and let me pray with anybody, which is everybody, struggling with the violence swirling around us, within and beyond us. Let us afterwards sleep through the night into the cool morning. Let us ask one another how we feel and open our ear hearts to feeling things together. Let us, to quote Brandon, share our attention. This is what my body craves, what it needs after too many years of feeling so afraid to see the truth, then speak it back, and too many years of feeling so ashamed, or even worse, protecting myself from those feelings in such destructive ways. Dear community, I'm here for what we share, for what connects and separates us. Allow me to be your soaked pulpy paper medium as we wander in zigzagging columns and fogged goggles towards that crickety wooden dock dropped right at the edge of the sea. This is called James and Ella, and they are my neighbors. I actually changed their names. James and Ella are. You never know. James and Ella moved into the apartment next door. They are young, in their 20s. Ella is a nursing student at the University Hospital on the Hill. James works remotely for a marketing firm. Over the first couple of days, we say hello to each other. We recall one another's names. James mentions he likes to play music that I might hear through our shared wall. And if the music is too loud, I can let him know. And I tell him he will not hear much at all from my side, other than my son infrequently yelling at the players of his beloved Phoenix Suns. James and Ella decorate our shared front porch with a variety of plants. We come and go from our apartments around the same time, mid-morning and late afternoon. And we make sure to close our front doors gently, quietly. They ask me what I do and express interest in my job. They mention they have taken note of my IBM Selectric, which you can see through the front window. In short, we have become good neighbors. Friendly, caring, curious. Eventually, they invite people over for a party, and I hear footsteps on the staircase up to our shared front porch. Their door opening and closing, voices laughing and exclaiming, and music pours through our shared wall. Another day, I see them on the front porch with 2 suitcases. They're headed to the coast for the weekend. If there's a package outside the front door, I'll grab it and bring it over when they return. I think a puppy will be coming into this picture very soon. On weekends, James returns with a 6-pack of cider or a carton of eggs. On weeknights, Ella returns wearing blue scrubs, looking exhausted, relieved to return to their new home. I can feel their love for each other and feel the ease with which they're settling into a shared life. It's hard not to imagine the rest. The puppy, family visiting them. Let's go see the kids in Portland. Graduation for Ella, promotions and career development for both, eventually buying a house and getting married, traveling together when they can, and when Ella's ready to go through pregnancy, 1 kid, eventually 2, the quiet struggle with which they figure out how to split childcare duties, the holidays, the puppy, so long from puppyhood, aches in its hips, the children performing with classmates in holiday plays, crowded with teary-eyed, tired parents. I realize I'm redreaming a happier version of my own difficult past, so I stop. Occasionally, I do hear, coming through the wall we share, their music, and I wonder if they play it loudly during sex so they don't have to imagine me hearing the sounds their bodies make, and instead can be focused on each other. As for me, I'm the perfect neighbor. James, James and Ella won't hear any sounds of fucking or loud music coming from my apartment. They might see me and my son heading out to grab a bite, or one of us carrying my son's dog, Mo, down the stairs so he doesn't re-injure his spine. Occasionally, James puts on a record and plays it loudly, but it's not a "we are fucking" record, but just the 2 of them enjoying some music. Last night it was Tom Petty's "Wildflowers," a divorce record if there ever were one. And I am imagining they're just tuning into the struggle, for our relationships are linked, the quiet melancholy that any marriage passes through. You are there, it's just the 2 of you, nobody else is coming over. It is not lost on me that I'm cheering for the relationship, for its meaning, its unfolding connectivity and longevity in ways I never cheered for, was unable to cheer for mine. Also not lost on me is the mess of any love ship. How over the course of many years together, any intimate relationship runs through many separations and meetings. How to share the struggles of their particular loops in ways that maybe add depth to their connection. How to solve or not the puzzle of Jack Gilbert's line from his poem, The Great Fires. Love lasts by not lasting. Today, as I walk up the porch stairs, I see a box of dog food outside the door. And Ella, leaving for school, tells me the puppy arrives on Friday. I can't wait to meet it, I say. Anxiety. I didn't locate the cotton swab at the end of my fingertips, nor did I see it on the bathroom floor tiles because it was still falling through the air. Headphones. My son wears headphones a lot of the time. We sit on the couch. Him working on his laptop on schoolwork and me watching tennis and making my ongoing commentary. This actually pieces for Vicky now because we're both we love to discuss tennis. Start that again. My son wears headphones a lot of the time while we sit on the couch. Him working on his laptop on schoolwork and me watching tennis and making my ongoing commentary about the players. the courts, the computer line calling system, the commentators themselves, and Oscar's not hearing a word I'm saying. I am having a conversation with myself. I begin moving my mouth as if I were speaking, lip syncing words and gesticulating dramatically so that when he lifts his headphones off his head to hear what I'm saying, he encounters exactly what he encountered before taking off his headphones. I had been doing these little jocular performances since he was born, and we do like to laugh a lot together. Later that night, I'm in bed with Mo the pug, for whom I'm also doing little performances. And I decide that I will give my son a little extra time in the morning to stop by. A little extra time in the morning to sleep by taking out Mo for his walk. And I call out to my son to let him know. I call his name 3 times and he doesn't respond. And then I imagine me doing this in 18 months, calling out his name and hearing no response. Not because he's wearing his headphones, not because he's wearing his headphones and cannot hear me, but because he's not here. He's moved out. And then I imagine my mom calling my name, calling my brother's names, each one after the next. Okay, this piece I'm going to read is totally ridiculous. It's called I Don't Go to the Movies, and I was trying to, I wanted to write like Gertrude Stein. Sometimes we have to, like Gertrude Stein is inside it, like suddenly inside of us, we wake up and Gertrude Stein isn't having us, and we have to become a typer. We have to become a Gertrude Stein. So this was my version of that. I do not, it's called I Don't Go to the Movies. I do not go. I don't go. I don't go to the movies. I do not. I don't go. I don't go to the movies. I don't go to the movies. Go to, my go-to. I go to. I don't go to the movies. I do not. I, the movies to go don't. Go movies that don't I to. I don't. Which is to say I contract do and not to form don't go to the movies. When I press together the words do and not, one word don't is formed. The long oo sound replaced by the long o sound. Do to don't, while the short o sound in not disappears. The vowel flow constricted by a partition of consonants. If this gives you any indication why I do not go to the movies. The flow never begins. The flow cinched by the consonants sound niet and t. Repeat this cinching sound niet again and again. Niet, 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 niet. And it sounds as if you were experiencing a dreadful discomfort, a grieving resistance, a refusal to let something in your body. Niet, niet, niet. Or you are combing through the hair atop a human head, picking young eggs, niet, 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 laid by the head louse. Niet. I don't go to the movies. The flow of semen has been cinched due to American vasectomy, so I don't need to go? Or no, the movies don't go to me. The movies only pretend to go to me. The movies show me a dream of going to the movies. The dream the movies show me, the dream of going to the movies, convinces me that I do actually go to the movies when I don't. The dream the movies show me, I'm sorry, I gotta. Okay, yeah. The dream the movies show me, the dream of going to the movies, turns me away from the actual movie going. I go to the not movies, which is the dream of going to the movies. I don't go. I never go. The word never, fixing my living body into a fixed emotional state. Only this channel, only this scone, only this artisanal flavored coffee. Only this store and only these 7 books, never a dating app, never asking a friend to dinner, never the Pica Gala, more no's and yets than yeses. I don't go to the movies. I do not. So this not is uppercase. The whole thing, N-O-T. I do not go to the movies. The uppercase letters skyscraping up. The not comprised of N-O plus N-T rising into the sky of the blank space above the other words, above the movie houses and restaurants and schools, above the warehouses and cafes and bookstores, above the community centers and churches and public park picnic shelters, all the places people gather outside of their homes, the bars and public houses, the yoga studios, the dance halls, all empty, rising far above the go and the to, above the above the I. The N-O plus N-T shrinking the I, leaving in its wake the action of not. Not stillness or quiet, but cessation, void. The sentence could be revised to read, yet I. I don't usually do this kind of thing, but I read a piece a while ago. Somebody had written about the late 80s and the 90s. It was so romantic. It was so, we're all like making our clothes. I don't know. It's just, it just felt so romantic to me. So I actually wrote a response to it. There was a lot of boredom in those days. We mostly worked jobs we hated and got paid terribly. Minimum wage was $3.75. We worked at bars, daycare centers, temp agencies, bookstores, Best Buy. We left one another telephone messages on broken answering machines that nobody ever tried to pick up anyway. And it didn't matter because we just meet up later or not. It's true. We lived in large houses, largely empty of furniture, say a couch we dragged in off the street. But we spent lots of time in our bedrooms behind closed doors, listening to music, reading, or staring up at the ceiling. I didn't like to read the classifieds in bed because the ink bled on my sheets, but most of us didn't have sheets. And our mattresses just sat on the floors. We'd walk to the convenience store for cigarettes, and the weather was nice. We'd sit outside on the curb and smoke and practice kickflips. Somebody, perhaps a little older, and who'd been at this a little longer, was always trying to convince us to buy into some obscure scheme to make more cash. Driving ice cream carts through the suburbs, delivering vans to Chicago, building a bottle cap. I spent late hours sitting in a booth at the Fuel Cafe where you could get refills on coffee and soup for $3, reading stories by hand created with James Baldwin, and writing in my notebook. Occasionally, you might find a few of us in the kitchen, fixing our own meals, just what you'd imagine. Mac and cheese from a box mixed in with frozen peas or hot dogs in the microwave. And a conversation might ensue about a book one of us was reading, or about the news from Waco and David Koresh, the trial of the cops who tried to murder Rodney King. Sally Potter's film Orlando. Had that novel been taught in the course on Virginia War? Could anyone remember? Or if any of us knew of Java, because we were always trying to get different jobs. We had a chore chart posted to the refrigerator nobody cared to follow. Sure, we were all in bands. We spent hours at the Kinko's as our flyers printed out. And yes, we witnessed Kurt Cobain destroy his guitar at the Unicorn, and that My Bloody Valentine show in Chicago might have damaged my hearing permanently. But what I remember the most was sitting in the kitchen with my roommate in utter silence after finding out our friend Julie had been working on the ground floor of the Murrow Federal Building in Oklahoma City when Timothy McVeigh detonated a truck bomb. Some of us drove 16 hours to attend her funeral. Some of us stayed because we couldn't get off work. This is called Mike issue. Letter to Green. I came back and my son was here. I had been at the store, then had returned to find Oscar sitting on the couch. Something felt different. It was not summer yet, it felt like summer. After an unusually rainy spring, the sunny, warm weather had finally come. And teaching was mostly done for me. So I had more time to do whatever. And also contributing to the different feeling in my body. The night before, we were together for the first time, staying out very late. I wanted to invite you to spend the night, but my son was with me. We just stayed out talking, then moved to my car. Past midnight by that morning. After touching each other for a while, I began to imagine my son wondering where I was, worried. And at one point, I interrupted our touching. I didn't want to do this, to check my phone, imagining all the texts he'd sent. Where are you? Is everything okay? I've decided to go to mom's, we're worried. Another part of me knew the truth, that there were no texts, that he'd stayed alone by himself many times now, that I was dreaming of a time when he needed me. Dear Green, you said he needs me in other words. And I came back from the store and he was here. And I asked him if he wanted to get lunch. We rarely get lunch together. I get him stuff and he put it in the fridge and he eats it and puts it in his mouth. And he said yes. And to anyone else, it appeared like a very ordinary lunch. He talked about things that irritated him at his job. And I either tried to advise him lightly by saying such and such is normal, or just echoed his irritation like we were on the same team, and we are. Then lunch ended and we drove back to my apartment. I fear I have used all of these words, way too many, to tell you what really is a very short story. I came back and he was here. The story used to be I left and he came with me and we came back together. And then it turned into I left and came back and he was here. Now that story is coming to an end, which is to say, I'm right in the middle of an ending, and I'm so afraid. So. Thank you all for coming. Let's give Alejandro and Joanna another round of applause. We have a lot of readings left, which is wonderful. Our next reading is tomorrow night. Jess Arndt and Allison C. Rollins will be reading. Next week, our final faculty guest artist reading is July 1st, Latanya McQueen and Kaming Chang. And also we have a bunch of student readings coming up. So, all right, thanks. Good night, y'all.